NBC News has exclusive new reporting that former American officials have held secret talks with Russian officials about the war in Ukraine. The goal? Laying a foundation for potential negotiations to eventually bring the war to an end. Sources say Russia's top diplomat, Sergei Lavrov, met with some of those former U.S. officials for hours in April in New York City. And new fallout from the failed mutiny in Russia led by the Wagner Group. You may remember it ended in an apparent deal that would allow leader Yevgeny Prigozhin and his soldiers to settle in Belarus in exile. But this morning, Belarus's president said Prigozhin is in Russia, despite being essentially banned from the country by the Kremlin. Joining me now to discuss it all is William Taylor, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. He's also the United States Institute of Peace vice president for Russia and Europe. Pardon me, Mr. Ambassador, my allergies. I want to start with these secret talks. How exactly are these talks happening without Ukraine?
They should not be, Simone. The basic rule on any negotiation, whether it's government to government or non-government to non-government, or in this case, non-government government to government, that is Sergei Lavrov, the basic rule on any of those is you don't talk about a nation who's not there. In this case, you don't talk about Ukraine between Americans and Russians. If you want to talk about Ukraine, you want to talk about the war, then you have Ukrainians at the table. This is the basic rule that apparently was violated.
You know, and I encourage people, Mr. Ambassador, to read the NBC News reporting because the story I do think is very illuminating. I have spoken with a member of the Ukrainian parliament about 2 weeks ago, and I asked that particular member of parliament, said, okay, wars are ended at negotiating tables. Eventually, you all will have to negotiate. And what will it take? And the member of parliament said something that I continue to hear from Ukrainians, that they will take nothing less than Ukraine's full sovereignty being adhered to. They want all of the Ukraine's land back. And I guess I don't understand how a back channel like this is the right strategy, or could it be? And just if Ukrainians were at the table, this could be a little different.
You're right. The grounds, the basis for negotiation between the Russians and Ukrainians at this point are just not there. Ukrainians' position is exactly what you said, Simone. They want the Russians out of their country. They want the Russians out of all of their country. The Russians, on the other hand, they've said they've annexed part of Ukraine, and they're not going to give that up. Now, that suggests that there's no overlap. There's no grounds for negotiations. So to have Americans talking to Russians without the Ukrainians at the table, again, violates the rule and is not productive.
But what does it say then about Russia's stance that their officials are even at these meetings? I mean, Sergei Lavrov is no, small fish.
He is no small fish. On the other hand, one can't really believe him. That's a problem for the lead diplomat. This is the man, Simone. We remember, you reported that before the invasion, Sergei Lavrov told the world, and indeed told the United States, told the Europeans that they were not going to invade Ukraine. We remember he said that, oh, the Americans are hysterical. They're trying to panic people, and sure enough, a week later, the Russians invaded Ukraine. So talking to this man, certainly without the Ukrainians, maybe at all, is not productive exercise.
Mm. Well, let me get your reaction to Lukashenko's announcement that Yevgeny Prigozhin is actually in Russia. What could be going on here?
What's going on here is the result of a very unclear negotiation, a very unclear deal. I mean, again, you've reported on how the deal was struck, Simone. It was through a third party, through President Lukashenko from Belarus. And they weren't directly negotiating with each other. That is, Putin and Prigozhin were not talking to each other directly. And there's probably nothing written down. So no one really knows what the agreement is. And neither side can be trusted, counted on to abide by whatever they think the deal was. So Prigozhin is apparently wandering around somewhere in Russia, maybe with 25,000 of his soldiers still with him, which can't make Putin happy. It can't make Putin pleased that here's this mutineer, this man who has generated an insurrection against his government, Putin's government, and he is somewhere in Russia, apparently still with his soldiers. So it's not clear that there was any real deal there in the first place.
The story develops. Mr. Ambassador, there is a key NATO summit on Tuesday. This week, you were one of dozens of foreign policy experts who signed a letter arguing that Ukraine should be presented with a roadmap to join NATO as soon as possible. Now, President Biden has said he believes Ukraine should go through the same process as everyone else. Why is fast-tracking Ukraine's membership so important?
So actually, I think President Biden has gone a little bit further than that. He has agreed that the Ukrainians don't have to go through what other nations, not all other nations, but some nations had to go through. It's called a membership action plan. President Biden, I think, has agreed that the Ukrainians don't have to do that. The Finns didn't have to do that. They're in. The Swedes are almost in. They didn't have to go through that. So President Biden has agreed that the Ukrainians can go faster than some of the earlier versions of this. But President Biden hasn't yet agreed that the Ukrainians should get an invitation from the Vilnius summit to sometime become a member. Everybody understands that the Ukrainians are not going to join while there's active fighting. Everybody understands that. President Zelensky has said that. However, what is really important is that Ukraine have a signal, have an invitation, have a reason to believe that they will join, a concrete reason to believe that they will join NATO in order to secure their own self, their own land. And that will make us better off, Simone. That'll make the United States better off. That'll make Europe better off. And that will mean that the world is a more secure place.
Ambassador William Taylor, thank you.